Hello there. As you know, I'm Lady Loy on Gold Standard Radio every Saturday, 7 till 9, and on Lovers Rock Radio every Friday, 7 till 9. And what I like to do is let people know what changes are happening, especially as musicians who may not have access to this information. And this is about somebody with a dual citizenship, how the laws are changing in 2 weeks' time, and we've only just been notified that if you've got a dual passport and you used to be able to come into the UK with the passport of the other nationality, you can't do that anymore. You have to come into the UK with the British passport. That's it in a nutshell, but let me tell you the details. There's a new legislation that has just come to light that could impact musicians and recording artists, especially those with dual nationality. It cuts straight into the practical reality of how a career actually functions. From the 25th of February 2026, dual British citizens travelling to the UK will need to enter on a British passport or a foreign passport that carries a certificate of entitlement. Certificate of entitlement is it proves that you can work, you have a right of abode in the UK. Airlines will check this before departure. No British proof, no boarding. That's the change. And while it's been framed as border security and digital travel update, it has real consequences for artists whose lives are already built around movement, short notice travel, and thin margins. Musicians don't travel like tourists, they travel on timelines shaped by gigs, sessions, festivals, touring windows, visa limits, budgets, and last minute calls. Many artists with dual nationality move fluidly between countries because that's where the work is. 1 week it's a recording session in Berlin, the next is rehearsals in London, then a festival slot somewhere else entirely. In that context, the passport you grab isn't symbolic, it's the one that gets you through fastest, cheapest, with the least friction. For years, a number of dual British citizens have entered the UK on their non-UK passport without thinking much about it, especially if they live abroad, especially if their British passport expired quietly in the drawer somewhere, especially if they became British later in life and their other passport maintained the one they habitually travelled on. The system allowed that looseness because at the border a British citizen cannot ultimately be refused entry. Things could be resolved on arrival. What's changed now is where that decision gets enforced. The check moves from the UK border to the airline desk, and that shift matters a lot if you are a musician. Because airlines are not interested in nuance. They are not interested in your touring history, your tax residency, your sense of identity, or your explanation, I've always done it this way. They want to see the green light on a screen before the plane leaves. If the document doesn't meet the rule, the answer is simply no. For an artist, that can mean a missed session, a cancelled performance, a lost fee, and a reputation hit that never makes the news but lingers quietly in the industry. Music work is relational. You don't just miss the gig, you miss the trust that comes along with being reliable. One border issue can ripple outward into months of knock-on effects. There's also a financial layer here that matters. British passports are not cheap. Certificate of entitlements, which prove you have the right of abode to work and enter the UK, are not cheap either. And they take time. For an artist already managing gear costs, studio time, travel, accommodation, and often self-funded projects, this is another administrative expense that doesn't feel creative but becomes unavoidable. For families of musicians with children holding dual nationality, the cost multiplies quickly. Now add the reality of short notice travel. Many recording artists don't book flights months in advance. A producer calls, a collaborator needs you, a replacement slot opens up, you move under the new rule. If your British passport has lapsed and you've been relying on your other nationality for travel, spontaneity disappears. The system does not bend for creative urgency. There's also an emotional undercurrent here that's easy to miss if you don't live in creative worlds. Many musicians exist between places. Dual nationality often reflects that reality rather than a neat legal category. Someone may feel Jamaican and British, or French and British, or something more layered than either label captures. Music careers are often born from that hybridity. Sound moves across borders before policy ever catches up. When official language says returning home, it assumes a clarity that many artists don't experience in their own lives. Home for a musician is often where the work is, where the band is, where the studio is, where the audience is. The UK may be legally home, but emotionally and practically, it's one node in a wider network. That's not a complaint. It's how creative economies function. For the Home Office perspective, none of this is personal. This is about tightening systems, moving towards digital permission to travel, and aligning the UK with practices already used by other countries. From the musician's perspective, though, it's another reminder that creative lives operate on the edges of systems designed for predictability, not improvisation. This change does not target musicians, but musicians will feel it more sharply than most because they cross borders more often, because their income depends on showing up, because they don't have HR departments or legal teams quietly smoothing things out behind the scenes. The artist is usually the logistics department. Not everyone reads Home Office updates, not everyone watches immigration policy closely. Many people will discover this rule the wrong way at an airport with a guitar case at their feet and a show on the line. That's where policy stops being abstract and starts being painful. So what does this mean in practical terms for artists and recording professionals? It means checking documentation now, not later. If you are a dual British citizen and your British passport has expired, that expiry is no longer a minor inconvenience. It's a barrier to entry. If you don't hold a British passport at all and you've relied on your other nationality, you need to decide whether a British passport or a certificate of entitlement makes more sense of your working life. And I just thought about something, because if you haven't been using your British passport and have been using the other passport, I think there's some kind of rule that if you haven't been in the UK regularly within a certain period, you could actually you might not even be eligible to a British passport. So supposing you're a musician living in a different country, you only come here occasionally when you get gigs, and you've been out of the country for, say, 3 to 5 years. I can't remember what the criteria is. You might not even be eligible for a British passport. Anyway, because I haven't looked, that just came to mind and I didn't research it. So swipe that off of your memory. But it's worth considering checking it out. It also means conversations within bands, crews and collectives. If one member can't travel, the whole project is affected. This isn't just about personal admin issue, it's a collective risk factor. And at a deeper level, it raises a familiar tension for creative workers. Systems are becoming more rigid at the same time as creative work becomes more global, more flexible, more borderless in the spirit, if not in law. Music flows freely online, people don't. None of this makes the policy illegitimate. States have borders, they enforce them, but it does mean that musicians once again have to adapt faster than the systems were designed to accommodate. If there's any silver outlining its clarity. Ambiguity is being removed. Painful as it is, this is short notice. But it does allow artists to plan properly rather than relying on informal flexibility that can disappear overnight. This story isn't really about passports, it's about friction between structured systems and fluid lives. Musicians live fluidly, the borders do not. And when those two realities meet, the cost is usually paid by the person